I thought I was buying a stolen guitar. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. That's right, I thought I found one of Brendon Small's stolen guitars. Just in case you missed this episode over here, Brendon Small recently had his recording studio broken into, and he lost some very iconic pieces, including the satin-finished Thunder Horse Explorer prototype. But another one that caught my attention was a weird, freaky SG. Now let me tell you guys, I've been looking for one of these for a while, so when this one showed up on Reverb not long after that, I thought, is this his stolen 12-string SG? Let's find out. Nope, it doesn't have the exact wood grain. I guess I'm not surprised it's not his exact one, because I bought this from a guy in the Czech Republic. But sometimes stolen guitars move countries like that, and when you buy a guitar and it turns out to be stolen, as long as you have a police report behind it, you will be able to get your money back if you're buying through PayPal. So I was really hoping I was going to be able to reunite Brendon Small with his old guitar, but no. Instead, we just get to learn about this freak of an SG model from the year 2016/2017. But first, let's talk about 12-string guitars in general. Alright, so when you normally think about a 12-string guitar, what comes to your head? For me, it's all about Rickenbackers. They dominated that market back in the 60s. You can check out my review of a 12-string Rickenbacker here. They've kind of got one of them interesting headstock designs. Instead of giant headstock like we've got going on here today, they have small headstock with tuners on the side and the front. A little bit confusing to know which is which, but, you know, you get used to it. It's an interesting design. But when it comes to 12-string Gibsons, what do you guys think of first? I think EDS 1275. That's the double neck SG type body shape guitar. Those were first introduced in 1963 in the solid body format that most people know about today. There were hollow bodied versions before that, though, for a couple of years. And then, of course, Gibson has 12-string acoustics. I don't really pay much attention to acoustics, but here's a cool SJ200 in a 12-string variation. But what about just single guitars with 12 strings on them from Gibson outside of acoustics? Here's your options. In the 60s, there was actually a 12-string 335 that Gibson actually did reissues of not too long ago. Or you could find a Firebird 12. And those things are kind of interesting because look at their headstock. They have a cool double triangle inlay on their headstock that's all rounded off. Kind of reminds me of like a custom emblem on a Les Paul Customs headstock. But in the very late 60s, you can also find the SG body-styled Melody Makers in a 12-string variant. But moving into the 70s, it's just kind of more of the same stuff as far as the double necks go and various acoustics. When it came to electrics, they didn't do too much. But if you're still craving a Gibson with 12 strings, you could check out the 2011 50th anniversary SG. That was a 12 string. That thing's kind of cool because it's got the special 50th anniversary logo on the headstock that Gibson used on quite a few models at that point in time. And then you've even got a run of Les Paul traditionals that have these giant 12-string headstocks on them. But these feature a maple neck, and they came in a few different finishes. The one I have right here is a gold top from my personal collection, but you can also find a black one as well as a cherry sunburst. So that leads us into the model that we need to learn about today. This was a limited edition for the 2016 year lineup. However, their serial numbers will read either 2016 or 2017 depending on when they were made. And there were only 150 of these made, 75 in our cherry finish right here, and then Vintage Sunburst also got 75. The initial price that they were sold for in stores was $3,200. But what's really fascinating about these guitars is the fact that they are a neck-through construction, unlike all those other ones that we were talking about. So it gives you some options as far as like single 12-string SGs go. You can get the regular one that has more traditional specs as far as the neck goes, or you can get this weird Firebird SG mashup mix-up model that just makes it so fascinating and interesting, especially because they made so few of them. The story of how I got one of each color is kind of interesting. You already know the story of why I bought this one, and I was looking for one anyways, but 20 minutes after that, another one shows up, but it's in the United States this time. So it's like, that's my sign. I was meant to buy both of these so they could be here for the documentation. And at first I was just thinking, okay, just for the video, then I'll find new homes for it. But now that I've got them in person, I think I'm just going to keep them as a set. I mean, this is such a weird future museum display piece thing with all these giant headstocks. I hate to say it, they start to look normal when they're all like that. However, there's a lot of confusion about these models and some things that I didn't realize that they had or how they were built differently from a Firebird or regular SGs. So let's go ahead and throw one of these on the workbench to take a look at its parts and specs to see what all we can find out. Inside the 12-string SG, let's check out our pickups. So we've got chrome covers on each of them, doesn't matter what finish. The pickups themselves are burstbucker 1 in the neck, and a burstbucker 2 in the bridge. As far as pickup measurements are concerned, 8.08 k ohms in the bridge, neck position at 7.65, and the middle for fun at 3.93. And here's what the pickup cavities themselves look like. You can see the continuation of the neck through design, which is a 9-ply walnut mahogany. Then HCX for Heritage Cherry, not quite sure what the X is about. Then the bridge pickup SG1216, likely standing for a 2016 model SG 12 string. But what I found really strange about this is they actually decided to route the pickup wires underneath our pick guard here, which I'm honestly just confused by. I mean, why didn't they just do it the normal way, go down here and then out there? That way you could actually have the option of having a pick guard off design, because this whole pick guard is a little bit different. They called it the angel wing. Normally an SG's pick guard would come right up to the pickup rings. But this one actually has a pretty sizable gap due to the fact that it's Firebird-like construction. You actually have a raised ridge right here, so they just put 2 pieces of mahogany on the edges on a Firebird that looks like an SG to transform it into an SG. But what's even stranger is they don't actually construct it the same way as a Firebird. Firebirds have like a V-shaped inlet pattern where it's notched in, and that kind of helps them secure it to the middle piece. But this one, it doesn't have that, which is very fascinating. That's why I decided to take this red one apart so we could see that more clearly. In stock from the factory, these would have a poker chip. However, the placement's really bad on them. They actually rest underneath the pick guard, so I'm thinking that's why somebody took that off of the SG one, because the pick guard doesn't rest 100% flush. And it features all your standard controls, a volume for each pickup, as well as a tone, with the output jack on the front. So now let's talk about the bridge system. Somebody actually set this one up to be played. This is not the original bridge. Probably what it should have came stock with, but this is one that has individual saddles for each string so you can set the intonation 100% perfectly. Whereas what originally shipped with these is a regular bridge system that shares 2 strings per saddle, so you can't get the individual adjustment. But it's PW branded. And you can see right here what that looks like stock all installed. The tailpiece is your normal full weight one. The only difference is the fact that, hey, it's got space for 2 strings in each slot instead of just 1. It has your usual casting mark back here. So this is definitely some sort of an interesting beast. Somewhere between a Firebird and an SG. Honestly, it feels just more like an SG though, despite being neck through in construction. I think that's what's cool about the 2 color options that they chose here. Cherry is all about an SG. Vintage Sunburst is all about a Firebird. So I think it just depends. Do you want a Firebird that looks like an SG, or do you want an SG that has some Firebird specs? That's what color you should decide on. And at first I was always team Firebird, but honestly, now that I've had this in person, I think Cherry is the way to go. But that is indeed a neck through construction. But now let's talk about the rest of the neck. So another unique factor to these over other SGs is the fact that it has true mother of pearl inlays right here. That's not pearloid like you normally get, so that is a premium feature of these particular instruments. Something else that freaked me out the first time I unboxed this is the fact that they came stock from the factory without fret nibs, as late as 2017. Like 2014, Gibson played around with that for a couple of years, but this is a little bit later than that, so I was a bit spooked at first. And I was really curious what this red staining was at the edge of each fret. It appears to be some sort of a finish. And at first I thought, okay, I guess it also could be blood of the player and they were sharp and then they had it all rounded over or something. But now that we've unboxed that tobacco one, I can concur that this one also has a dark staining by some of the frets. So that appears to be factory, just a sloppy job. You can really see it on that one. So if you see one of these for sale and that scares you off, don't be scared. That's just how they are, apparently. But you've got 22 medium jumbo style frets, 24 3/4 inch scale length, with a 12-inch fretboard radius. We have a nut that measures close to 1.74 inches, so a little bit wider than normal, and at the 12th, 2.14, with a first fret measuring 0.81, and that increases to 0.94, so that definitely maintains the skinny neck that SGs are known for. However, it's just a little bit wider. It could be way worse than it is. It honestly didn't feel that different when I was strumming it. Here's what the neck profile looks like at the first fret and the 12th fret. Definitely closer to a wide C-shaped neck. Doesn't have tons of shoulder to it. it's just your regular nut here, but slotted for 12 strings. And I mean, just in case this is your first 12 string episode, how's a 12 string guitar tuned? It's tuned in octaves. So you have a high E, low E, same thing for your A string, D string, G string, but then the B and the E, they're just doubled of the same octave. It seems dumb to have two strings be the exact same thing, but trust me, it gives you a way different tone playing both at the same time. The truss rod cover is a bit of a letdown. It's just blank, stock from the factory. I really think a SG-12 on this would have looked fantastic, or like do like the SG Diablo series where they have like a brass truss rod cover. But then the headstock is surprisingly plain on this bad boy. You get the Gibson Mother of Pearl logo, so that's a win, but you don't get the usual SG crown. And I think it's because of that, this headstock does not look anywhere near as weird and goofy and long as the Les Paul one, because you don't have a frame of reference. Because this looks pretty goofy because it's like, you've got all this space in between here. I'm like, yeah, that's strange. But yet looking at this right over here, just not quite as strange. I mean, when you're looking at it in person, I'm sure in video it's just like, what are you talking about, Trogly? Those are some giant headstocks. But it looks like our truss rod is in good shape on this one. But now we flip around to the backside. Not much to talk about here except the SG gets all the usual comfort carves, but then everything else here is pretty much Firebird. What is unique about this is the heel cutaway though. That's different from any other SG. Due to the fact that it's a true neck-through construction, they could really do whatever they wanted to. In fact, it's a little bit disappointing they didn't just completely round that off to make it even more comfortable, but it is a very nice swooped cutaway right there. But you've got the large strap buttons in your usual locations. Then here's what our control cavity looks like. I forgot to comment on just how bad the cavity route job was underneath that pickguard. I mean, there's a whole bunch of splinters. I mean, back here isn't that much better, but it's way better than it was up there. This is peak of the era where they weren't so good at cleaning things up in the finer detailed areas. But we've got Gibson branded pots, looks like dated 7/26 of 16, which is important to note because the serial number dates this one to 2017. But you have to remember, back in this era of Gibson, the next year's serial numbers started about 3/4 of the way through the year because new guitars were like cars back then. They just sold the next year's model at the end of the year. So that's probably a better indication of when this guitar was actually completed. Late July into August. And this utilizes the textured backplate. The reason why it's textured, it's not just a, hey, look at me, we're a little bit different. It's because it has built-in shielding. But here's a good look at that join area. Exactly as I was telling you. They just joined the SG body and glued it in there. I'm honestly really sad they didn't do the cutaways. I was looking forward to seeing that cross section, but okay. And obviously our neck, you can see the walnut stripes going down it. It's a 9-ply neck, so you got a whole bunch of stuff going on. I'm surprised they didn't even go as far as putting a volute on it. I mean, they could have, they just sanded it away. But as far as our tuners, we've got these mini Grovers. And you could replace it for true Grovers, but then you'd have to, make even more holes in the headstock. But the true reason why they went for these smaller ones is due to the fact that this is already a neck-heavy instrument enough. Even with these small ones, putting full-size Grovers on here would just be a complete death sentence. But what's really strange here is I don't see a date serial. I mean, this is within the time frame that Gibson would say 2016 model or 2017 model on the back of the headstock, as well as the Made in USA. But what's really interesting here is my vintage Sunburst one does. Right under Made in USA, it says 2016 model, and this one has the earlier 2016 serial style. So that might just be a mistake on this particular one. But hey, that's another justification as why I can have both of these in my collection. But all said and done, I've won the lottery. 7 pounds, 7.7 ounces. Lucky sevens for this one. The tobacco one's about the same as well. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and see what kind of tones we can get out of it. Now that we know all about the 12-string SG neck-through version, what are my final thoughts on this thing? It's a very strange beast. If you like thin necks, this is definitely going to be for you, because the Les Paul 12-string definitely has a bigger neck than this one, and that's the biggest difference that I felt in between those two. However, I actually kind of found myself preferring this one because it's more what I'm accustomed to. Like, I've had the double neck EDS 1275s, and those are kind of SG shapes. So naturally, having 12-string sounds come out of something that looks kind of like an SG is not all that jarring. I think this is the model that pulls off being a 12-string Gibson the best, because it's familiar, it's different, it's weird, it's quirky. Is it worth paying whatever collectors make you pay for it? I don't know. I'm sure there's cheaper 12-string options out there, but where else are you going to get a neck-through SG? The only complaints I have are the nuts were not very well cut on either of these, especially the red one. There's a reason that they have all that graphite in the nut, because as you're tuning up, the nut is catching the strings, and that just makes tuning a 12-string even harder. But anyways, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed checking these two out with me today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.